Okay, good morning, everyone. And I know people are still joining, but I'm going to go ahead and get started since we only have 1 hour. Thank you for attending our SB 671 workgroup meeting. I'm going to turn it over to Cherry to give you instructions about how to comment via webinar.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the SB 671 workgroup meeting. For participants joining us through GoToWebinar, please find the webinar panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. There you will find the audio, question, and handout tabs. The meeting agenda is located under the Handouts tab and can be downloaded and saved during the webinar. It can also be found on the Commission's website. Under the audio tab, you have the chance to listen in via the computer or telephone option. If you prefer computer audio, please select the appropriate box. If you prefer the phone call option, select the corresponding box and dial the phone number, access code, and audio PIN. Please note that if the audio PIN is not entered, you will remain in listen-only mode. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and phone number to access the webinar. These cannot be shared with other participants as they are registered to each specific attendee. There are two options for you to provide comments or feedback. The first option is to raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. This will indicate to us that you wish to speak. At the appropriate time, CTC staff will unmute you so that you can provide your comment. We ask that you state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. The other option is to use the Questions tab. Click on Questions and there will be a box to type in your comment. At the appropriate time, CTC staff will read the comment on your behalf. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you sharing your time and feedback with us.
Okay, thank you, Cherry. Mainly today's agenda is focused on updates. We're going to give you an update from our September 27th meeting, from when we presented the priority clean freight corridors and the projects that we received. We presented those to commissioners in October at the October Commission meeting. I want to tell you where I'm at with some of the barriers and solutions I'm trying to put together. And then Kelsey from the Army Corps is going to give you an update on their modeling efforts, our modeling efforts with them. And I also just really want to give the work group members a chance to raise any questions or concerns that you may have with anything. So that's our plan for today, and we can go ahead and get started on the first item, which is an update from the September 27th meeting. And you can go to the next slide. And Cherry, are you going to give this update? Cherry really did a lot of work for this. She did most of the work to make this meeting happen. So I just want to thank her for that. Go ahead, Cherry.
Sure. So our last work group meeting was the in-person meeting held here in Sacramento. The California Air Resources Board co-hosted us at the Cal EPA building, and we want to thank them for coordinating the event with us and providing that space for the work group. In total, we had 40 attendees join us that day, including those from private industry, truck stop companies, consultants, ports, and so it was a good variety of attendees. We, of course, also had attendees from the public sector, the CTC, CARB, Caltrans, and we also had our CTC Commissioner, Hillary Norton, and State Senator Josh Newman join us as well. We discussed hydrogen and electric infrastructure, grant funding, and total cost of ownership, and we received some great feedback and ideas and thoughts that were shared during the meeting. We'll be incorporating what we can into our work as we move forward with writing the assessment. And so overall, we just want to thank everyone who made the trip to Sacramento. We were really happy to hear just a lot of positive feedback afterwards. So if there are any questions, I can take them, but we can also move on to the next topic. And I don't see any questions on the handouts tab.
Okay, I can give an update on the October meeting. So at the, thanks, Cherry. So at the October meeting, we presented the priority clean freight corridors that we've been talking about for a while to commissioners, and we also presented the projects that were submitted by work group members. And the commissioners were generally supportive. They didn't raise any real concerns. So what that means is because the commission is responsible for producing the assessment, we have to, I have to check in, and we have to check in with them periodically along the way via informal briefings or at commission meetings. I should probably say and at commission meetings. And so the information is always subject to change based on their input until the draft is finalized in August, and then it's going through a formal review process for everyone. So I just want to caveat that for now, we're considering the priority clean freight corridors done and the project submission phase done, but all that information is still subject to change if the commissioners give us some additional input. We'd want to work with you if you had any significant concerns anyway, but there's 8 or 9 requirements in the bill. So for now, we're going to set these aside and consider them done for now and keep moving forward so that we can handle everything else that's in there. Yeah, and what we're working on now, and I can get into this in the next slide, is that we're really trying to make a plan for where the hydrogen or charging stations should be located. We're trying to understand where that's best for businesses and where it's most needed first. So we're trying to model that and then work with the Energy Commission, the utilities and the PUC to understand and start to get ready for the so we can build the electric infrastructure that's needed to support those stations. So that's really what we're working on now. And I'm also trying to work with you all to articulate some of the really great ideas that I've heard from you along the way and some of the concerns that you have, so that I can include those in the barriers and solutions section of the report. Because as I've said before, what my goal is to have the report identify where's the gap in infrastructure, like based on the anticipated number of vehicles that we believe will be required as a result of the advanced clean trucks and advanced clean fleets. How many stations a year would we need to support those? How much would that cost, and how much time would that take? And then what are some of the other, so how are we going to do that? What does that look like? That's what I want to identify at the number, the time, and the cost. And then the associated electric infrastructure, we're also working on that. But I think that that's going to be an ongoing process. But we're definitely going to incorporate whatever results we can into our assessment from that work with the PUC and the utilities. So that's kind of my plan. And then I also want to incorporate some of the other challenges and solutions, like around just grant funding. We talked about that in our in-person workshop, leasing options, all kinds of great ideas, some weight exemption ideas. There's a lot of different problems and a lot of different potential solutions that I've heard from various work group members. And so I'm going to do my best to articulate those in the report as well, in the barriers and solutions section. So that's my plan, and that's what we're working on right now. But we can talk about that. And before we do, does anyone have any questions on the update to the commissioners in October on this slide?
I don't see any questions in the questions box.
Okay.
No hands raised either.
Okay, we can move to the next slide then. I think it's kind of what I was just talking about. Yeah, so some of you may have seen it, but I've been sending around a Word document that has the base assumptions in it. So the information that we would use to develop what I just said about the number of stations needed, the time it would take to build those, and the cost. And I realize that there's a range. It's not like each one of those questions is just going to have one answer. But in order to get that, I'm working with the Energy Commission and the Air Resources Board on the number of vehicles. But I also need some assumptions about like the average cost to build a station. I have the average time it takes for electric infrastructure upgrades, depending on the level of upgrade from the CPUC. So I have some of the information, but I also need some. So if you have any information, like some of the information I still need is I still need to understand the total cost of ownership, because I have someone researching that to see what they can find. But I also really only have one document that is like a credible academic paper right now, and I'm trying to find more sources. So if you or your company wants to give me some input on total cost of ownership for zero emission trucks, then that would be great, and I would love to see whatever you have. So I still need that. I also need average cost to build an electric charging station. And someone did give me a link to some information online that was helpful. And that was what I was looking at, was specific to the cost for DC fast chargers. But if any of you have any information on average cost of electric stations, that would be for trucks, that would be good. So I can send the paper out to any, please let me know if you want to see my base assumptions document, and I will send it to you. And if you have any information that you would like to share with me for it, then please send it to me, because I'm trying to pin those numbers down so that we can start working on that. And I want it to be something that industry can support. So does anyone have any questions or comments on this section?
And it looks like there is a question, a written one. This is from Alejandra Mier Iteran. We know some of our truckers are going through the process with SDG&E. We can let you know how it evolves. So it's actually a comment.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Alejandra. Yeah.
And then we have Jeff Wingfield, asking to please share some of that information with him.
Okay,
So
Sherry, can you note that? So okay. All right, we'll send you that. Thank you. So we'll keep working on that. Yeah, next slide, please. So here's some of the draft challenges and recommended solutions that I have received from the work group, and then I'm working with various people to try to further define and articulate. So what are the challenges with state and local permitting, and what does it look like to try to get through that process as quickly as possible to get stations built? And Sherry is actually working on a write-up about that, and she's working with GoBiz, who also has experts that work on that. So we're working on that. We also are planning, and this is subject to the commissioners, but we're planning to recommend some CEQA exemptions for the projects that we identify in the assessment, so that we can just have them completely exempt from CEQA. But some of them already would be, some hydrogen stations already would be. But we're working on that. Incentive funding, and there was a concern raised by a few of you about the fact that it has to be surplus, or for some CARB funding, incentive funding, you actually have to do more than what is required in order to be eligible. But since some of the regulations are, pretty ambitious, would we consider, or would CARB consider possibly changing that rule, or could we get some incentive funding that does not require you to be making a change that is more than what the rule requires? So we're working on that, and I'm working with CARB on that, and so we'll continue to work on that, and let me know if you have any comments. Streamlining grant programs, we talked about this in the in-person meeting. And so we are working on some short and long-term plans for how we could make that easier for people. Useful life of infrastructure, that's just thinking about how will we try to ensure that once we build something, it stays meaningful for a while, so that whoever is building it can see a return on investment and feel like it's a good investment. I could use some more information on that actually, but we are trying to gather information for that. Energy rates, that's actually a very complex topic, as I'm sure everybody knows, and I will be working with the Energy Commission and PUC on that. Tax breaks, that was a great idea about having a tax break on the purchase of zero emission trucks. So we'll write something about that. Workforce training, we all know that we need more workforce training to get people used to maintaining their trucks and also working at the stations too. So we'll also be working with people to write some recommendations about that. Leasing options, truck as a service, the border of US and Mexico, and how we can, what are those short-term needs, like for drayage trucks and things like that, and trucks crossing the border, and how can we try to get infrastructure built there as quickly as possible, and what are some of those options. We're working on that. I know that there's supposed to be a roundtable on November 30th that CARB is working on, and I'm hoping to participate in that. So we're trying to formulate some solutions about that. Weight exemptions and the possibility of requesting a weight exemption for heavier vehicles at the beginnings, so that electric vehicles are allowed to carry the same amount and have the heavier weight because of the battery. And insurance rates. So those are all things that we're working on, and happy to hear any thoughts or ideas that people have, or if you think we're missing anything, then let me know. I didn't include everything in this slide, but that's a lot of what we're working on right now for the barriers and solutions. So any comments, any thoughts on this slide, on these topics, or anything that you didn't see here that you want me to include?
So Hannah's Cherry. We received several questions or comments in the box. I can go down the list and just read them out. So from Aravind Kailas, I will have some information on TCO and station costs. He also later on mentioned we also need an item to expedite energization. I would tweak it to streamlining and harmonizing utility processes so it's consistent for IOUs, MOUs, and CCAs. And then he continues regarding the tax break, FYI, the bill SB 542 died in the assembly a second time, and there's angst in the ledge to relinquish this windfall from sales of ZETs, and so that's just an FYI. We also have a question from Vincent Paleccia. The question is, when you say average, what does that mean exactly? And I think this is pertaining to the average cost of a station.
Well, what I mean is that if I give this report to the legislature and I'm trying to ask for money, and I'm trying to say, in order to build the infrastructure that we need to support advanced clean fleets and advanced clean trucks, I need to be able to give them some kind of ask, or, okay, so how many stations does that take in the next 5 years, in 2024, over the next 20 years? How many stations are we talking about? How much does that cost? And what do we need to get it done as quickly as possible, and how quickly can we get that done? Because I need to ask for something, and I'm trying to ask for the money and possibly the time, although we might need to think about solutions that would make it as much as possible able to build as quickly as possible. So how can we do that? And that comes down to like permitting and things like that. So I'm trying to formulate an ask that is informed by you all, where I feel like what we're asking for is what you're saying that you need. But it's very hard to just, I can't give the legislature a an ask that is extremely station specific and for that many stations. I mean, we could try, but I think it would be beneficial to have an average cost of building an electric and hydrogen station, because it would be easier to formulate some of those asks that way. So I also am going to ask for the cost of the associated for hydrogen distribution, and for the electric infrastructure. So that is part of the equation that I need, but also how much does it cost to just build the station itself? So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
So this is Cherry again. We do have a few raised hands. So I will unmute Ray Pingle. Ray, you're now unmuted. Actually, it looks like you're self-muted. So if you can click that box, we'll be able to hear you.
Gotcha. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Ray Pingle, Sierra Club, California. And yeah, there's a wealth of information out there available through some of the agencies, Hannah. And I don't know how much you have and how much I could find and send to you. But for example, on incentive funding, one of the most important incentives is the Inflation Reduction Act. Now you can gain a federal tax credit of up to 30% for up to $100,000 per charger, and that's not related to any of CARB's regulations. I believe that the CEC's HI's funding for charging infrastructure projects, I don't think that is impacted by CARB's rules. I think that's available, so you'd have to confirm that. And similarly, the IOU programs, the PUC has authorized, $700 million for charging infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And I don't think that is dependent on CARB's rules either. You'd have to confirm that again, but I believe that's correct. On useful life of infrastructure, there's some really good information that CARB has done, some of which is in their TCO models that they've done for the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. There's some documents that have some of that. And then on energy rates, the CARB has also done some really good work there on looking at what the costs for the 5 major utilities are in the state, and what the estimated cost would be per kilowatt hour on average for those, on a weighted average for those. That could be very helpful to you. And then on workforce training, labor, has a lot. I've got some contacts there that can tell you what the IVITP training program is doing right now and how it's progressing to train electricians on how to safely install infrastructure and kind of where that is. So yeah, there's and let's see this. Have you been working with the CEC on the heavy load modeling tool at all?
Yes.
So that'll give you a good idea of where the vehicles are going to be when and where the charging infrastructure needs to be.
Well, yes, we're actually working with the CEC to provide some information about where the vehicles are going to be, because that's what the Army Corps is doing for us. Is they have ATRI data, ATRI truck sample data, and replica data, and Kelsey's going to talk about that in a minute, so I won't go into too many details, but they also are going to run an optimization to try to figure out where is the least divergence from current truck path for stations, and they're taking like truck stops into account where those are and things like that. But so yeah, we are working with the Energy Commission. We are trying to identify those locations and then work with the Energy Commission and LBNL to tie energy load to them to understand energy demand, and then think about where it would be best for business and perhaps take less time and try to find those stations first, and then go from there and just try to work with the PUC and the utilities to identify the electric infrastructure. So we are actually working on that, and we will keep this group updated on that progress. And I do have the CARB had given me their total cost of ownership that they referenced in their SRIA, and that's the document that I currently have. So I do have that. I just wanted to make sure that I was getting information from a lot of different sources. And we are familiar with the Energize program. We worked with the Energy Commission to provide a briefing for this group on the Energize program in a prior meeting to talk about all the different incentive programs that are out there. So we're just thinking through if the current incentive programs that are out there are best suited to meet the needs of businesses as they try to transition, and if there's anything that we can do to try to make the programs even more helpful than they already are. But we agree that that's a great program, the Energize program. I appreciate your input. Yeah.
Yeah, and just one other thing. So on the on the cost per station, so CARB has in there some of their TCOs and SRIA and ISOR reports on the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. Cost per station based on the power level of each, or the cost per charger based on the power level of those. And their source document was a really good study from ICCT. So those could be some sources of cost per charger. And then, are you familiar with AB 841, which requires the utilities to assume all the costs on their side of the meter, so that the costs that we need to be concerned about in this project are just the costs of installing infrastructure from the customer meter out, so on the behind the meter side of things. So that should simplify some of that.
Well, but realistically though, I think we need to look a little broader, because if the utilities are not, we want to help them be as proactive as possible, and they're regulated by the PUC. So the PUC is trying to work on planning this new demand into their plans, and then they need to give permission to the investor-owned utilities to be able to build out proactively, and because unless some of that is done, we won't have the power that we need to really put those stations in. But I will take a look at that AB 841, yes, and see.
And then just one last thing, as far as whether the utilities can go ahead and build proactively infrastructure, they now can. There was another bill that the governor just signed this fall. I think it's AB or SB 2700. And what that does is that just definitely gives the utilities the ability to proactively build infrastructure. I mean, they can analyze where these priority routes are, for example, and say, well, we know that we're going to need so many chargers along these priority routes, and we might have to put another substation in if we're going to have to support MCS stations, for example, that require a lot of power. And therefore, we can actually go ahead and start putting some of that infrastructure even before we have customers making requests for that infrastructure. And that's really important because it could greatly speed up the process. So there's a lot of good things happening recently that I think is going to help contain the costs and the timeframes to put the infrastructure in. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Cherry, do we have any other comments before we move on? I want to make sure Kelsey has time to share her slides too.
Right, yeah, we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 5, 6 hands. Oh, actually, like 8 hands raised.
Well,
or
that's
raised
good.
hands.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Let's see. So Luke McNeil-Caird, I will unmute you. Looks like you are self-muted. Luke, you are free to speak, but it looks like you're self-muted. Okay, I will move on to the next person. Leslie Goodbody, I will unmute you. All right, let's continue. Vincent Paleccia, you are unmuted and free to speak.
I just wanted to reiterate what I wrote in the box there about the average for any of these projects is, it's very hard to say what an average is, right? You can maybe do like something on a scale of cost per kilowatt, because obviously the cost per kilowatt for installation goes down the more chargers you put in. But again, that's going to be a question in terms of how much power you have, because then you're going to hit another threshold of this site might have a power limit, and then that's going to bring in a whole different consideration of how you bring in, you know, if you're like going over 5 megawatts, for example. So there's a lot packed into that that notation of average is kind of what I just wanted to highlight.
Yeah, but Vincent, like how else, unless I mean, if you don't think it's a good idea to do an average, then what's the best way, you know, to have a starting place to say approximately this is how much money we would need. You know what I mean? Is there another way you would suggest going about it?
It might be helpful to try to do the costs around like scale, right? So if you're installing, you know, 100 kilowatt or 500 kilowatts or megawatt, something like that, where you can see the cost per kilowatt for installation,
Okay.
you know, which
Yeah.
is obviously much more complicated, and I'm not sure simplifies your life at all. But the reality is to just say like, what's the average cost? There's so many things that come into that answer right away.
Yes.
And I understand what you're trying to do, so you're extra complicated by the fact that that discussion is extra complicated.
I know. Okay. Well, that's good advice. I will think about doing it that way then and trying to figure that out. Yeah. And to the extent that the work that we're trying to do can be informed by you know, you and other people who are trying to also work in this space, then I think we'll incorporate your feedback. And then we'll try to also just figure it out. So we'll get to something, but I appreciate your input. I'll think about doing it on a cost per kilowatt. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Cherry, did anyone else come off mute or?
Let me, we have Teresa Daugno. Teresa, you're now unmuted.
Hi there, good morning. So Hannah, I also wanted to mention in terms of potential challenges, not just addressing weight exemptions, but actual pavement conditions and how that can be considered with the heavier trucks that are ZE. So I think that's a consideration with regards to making sure that there's the appropriate pavement technology really in place to handle the weights. And at the same time, there could be an opportunity to look at options related to cool pavement or the actual composition of the pavement itself in terms of helping with the climate change issues. So didn't want to neglect that. I know it's not a sexy topic, but it's something that is part of the infrastructure that's going to be used by ZE trucks or other newer vehicles that may have different types of weight considerations.
Yeah. Do you have any sources of like studies or companies that are doing that kind of pavement? If so, can you send them to me? Because the write-up that we have includes that we're working on includes information from a study from Caltrans that did look at the cost of maintaining the pavement if like 85,000 and 90,000 pound trucks were on it. And it talks about like thickness of pavement and things like that, but it doesn't really go into different pavement designs because it's focused more on the cost to just maintain the existing pavement. But if you have any sources about information about like where we could actually build differently if we're laying new pavement, then that would be helpful to kind of inform that section.
So I don't have any specific sources. I have raised this as a concern for the 710 corridor, given the high volume of truck traffic in and out of the port. You know, when I went to UC Berkeley for grad school, I know there was a lot of emphasis in terms of pavement research there. I haven't looked up if they have anything with regards to the technology that, you know, aside from my awareness that this could be a challenge, not just for the operations, but longer term maintenance of areas that are going to be taking on the heavier trucks. I think it's something that should be addressed, because without the, I think, appropriate pavement, you could have other issues regarding wear and tear, right? Safety issues that result from the lack of maintenance and strength of the pavement to handle the volume as well as the weight of the trucks.
Okay. Well, I have a student who is helping me research that section, so I can ask them to look into that as well to try to add it in as a consideration. And Caltrans, I've been talking to Caltrans about some different things, like the percent of class 7 and 8 trucks that we actually think would hit that weight limit based on, I want to see if we can try to get that information from like the weigh and motion scales, but I will, but they probably have thought of things like that too. And I just need to ask them. So I'll try to, I'll think about how we could incorporate something like that in that section of the report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carissa.
Hannah, we have another handful of folks. Leslie Goodbody, looks like Leslie was able to unmute. You are now unmuted and free to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, it was on your end. It said the host did not unmute me, but thank you for taking my call. I've been wanting to comment for a while. The Energize program, I know you've mentioned it, and Ray Pringer brought up a number of great comments. I'm just going to echo that because we're state agencies, you can probably reach out to the folks at the Energize team to do some application mining. That's what we like to call it. Look at some of those applications behind the scenes to try to get some more accurate and current cost information about the cost to install charging infrastructure and hydrogen stations. Now I know that the public charging infrastructure funding, I'm not sure if that solicitation is closed yet, but keep an eye on it because there should be a lot of really good information coming in there. And I think something like $83 million worth of applications flooded in for the public hydrogen infrastructure one for heavy duty. So there should be a lot of good information there. Another thing I wanted to say is that Ray is correct. The incentive funding, the CARB vehicle regulations do not impact the incentive funding. So yes, while we don't typically provide funding for vehicles if they're being used to comply with the regulation, we have no say or jurisdiction over funding that goes towards infrastructure. And another thing, I'm hoping that you can reach out to the folks at CARB through the HFIP programs or the Innovative Small E-Fleets programs to see if they can help you provide any kind of insights to help inform a number of those areas where you're seeking input on. Maybe we can circle back offline and I can try to get you in touch with the right folks there. And that's all I have for now.
No, I appreciate that. And actually, I already did reach out to CARB. I've been working really closely with Catherine Garrison and Annalisa Bevan, and then Stephanie Kong also helps out. So I feel like I have good contacts there.
Mentioned are on incentives.
I'm sorry?
So none of those folks you just mentioned are part of our vast incentive programs, and that's why I'm chiming in.
Yeah,
so,
I
make
asked
sure
them.
you catch us up on that end.
No, that sounds good. Well, I'm totally grateful for any help you want to provide if you have a name for that. I did ask them to put me in touch with the incentive program people for that. But yeah, if you know who that is, that would be great.
That would start with me, please, Hannah. And then I'll get you in touch with the right people.
Or?
Yes, I can
Okay.
get you in touch with the right people on that. Yes. Okay.
All right, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
So just giving a time check, it's 10:40. We do have 4 other hands raised. Let's see, Bill Boyce. Bill, you are now unmuted and free to speak.
Okay, I think I'm there.
Yes,
Yeah, I wanted to point out, and I stuck this in the notes because I wasn't sure I was going to get a chance to talk, but with regards to unit costing, there's really couple ways to go about it. One, trying to do it by the kilowatt, but I'm just going to state on the West Coast Clean Transit Corridor, we kind of just picked 2 stock designs that we thought would mesh with industry. And one was kind of what is the existing technology today, and that assumed like 350 kilowatt chargers, and putting in 10 of those and getting to kind of a stock design. But we also recognize that there's going to be a lot of technology changes on this stuff over the next decade. And so we stuck another one in at 23.5 megawatts. And last thing I'll say on the utility end, and this kind of Hannah, I think goes a little bit to you. One of the things we found on the utility end is if you just pick dots on the page, you can end up picking a dot where it's really hard to get electric utility service. And it was much better to do things like pick a dot with a 10-mile radius around it, and then have the utility evaluate what the options are and have the flexibility of moving that dot on the map to something that's going to be more cost effective. And probably more important for you is not just necessarily the cost, but the schedule of getting something in. If you've got existing infrastructure that you can tap onto, that's really going to improve the schedule. And I tend to think the schedule is probably the most critical thing in getting all these trucks starting to deploy. So we have a lot of work we've done over the last 3 years on this. I'm sorry I'm kind of late to the party, but we'll try and share as much of that as we can with you, and kind of shore up some of the stuff that we've plowed the ground on, and starting to talk to other stakeholders external to the utilities.
Okay. Yeah, Bill, didn't we meet with you and your team recently on your work? I feel like we did. I remember that. And
yeah, we just kind of gave you the introductory briefing. We probably need to spend more time with you and some of the other stakeholders with regards to a lot of the things we've looked at. And then also there's some other specific things to California where we've kind of done a deeper dive on that I think we can bring to the party.
Okay, sounds good. Maybe we can follow up. And I kind of want to get let the Army Corps and yes, I will follow up with you. I won't say anything more because I want to give Kelsey time. Okay. Thank you.
So
all right.
We have, So we have 3 other raised hands. Luke McNeil-Caird, you are now unmuted. Oh, okay, it looks like he put his hand down. Melody Black, you are unmuted and ready. You're able to speak now.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment on the earlier point that was made around AB 2700 and the utilities being allowed to, or having authorization to start proactively building out a grid infrastructure. While AB 2700 definitely is a good step and a step in the right direction in that it directs the CEC to provide the utilities with information that will support those infrastructure build outs, it does not authorize the utilities to begin that build out. We would still need authorization from our regulators, such as the CPUC, to move forward with any grid updates and enhancements. I also wanted to mention separately that there is a advice letter pending before the commission around some average energization timelines for EV charging. That's between 90 and 160 days. But I do want to caution that timeline as proposed by the utilities is really focused on projects where there is, everything is ready to go. There's not upgrades that are needed. If there are upgrades that are needed to the distribution system or transmission system, that is going to require some significant additions of time. And so, of course, we can meet with you separately if that's useful to talk through some of that, but want to be just clear that there are some timelines that are out there, but they really are for those things that are ready to move forward.
Yeah, that's no, I appreciate that. And that's also what I had heard from other utilities and from the CPUC. And they gave me some timeframes associated with, like, if you just have a minor upgrade, if you have kind of a medium level, or if you have a really high, like a significant upgrade, about how long is that going to take? And I know that they're trying to work with the CEC to be able to get that information that you're referring to into their planning process so that they can then, allow their regulations to reflect that. So, yeah, we're trying to work with them to get that done as quickly as possible and work with the CEC on that to inform. And our role is really not only to try to articulate it for this assessment and to try to make this a avenue whereby we can make one kind of state vision that's coordinated, but also to just try to inform the locations where that's needed, with thinking about what the fleets need and what the smaller independent owner operators need. That's what we're trying to bring to the table. But yeah, so thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
And so who else, Cherry?
We have Aravind Kalas. Aravind, you are now unmuted and free to speak.
Thank you so much. I won't take up more than a minute. First off, great job pulling this forum together, going through this. This is a very, very important and timely discussion. Melody beat me to the punch. I was exactly going to underscore those points and provide more clarity, because let us just be clear about what can be done and cannot be done. I mean, the utilities want to build out the infrastructure. However, not everything that they need exists today. And so AB 841, it's only to the meter. And as Melody pointed out, it's only for things that are ready to go. And honestly, it's not even been a year, I think, since AB 841's passed. So let's not think that this is a done deal. We still need to be mindful of how things are moving. And someone made a comment about Energize. Let me be clear. Energize has a few tracks. It's a very good, innovative program, but much effort is needed to tweak that and make it relevant to meet the costs for charging infrastructure. For those of you who may not be familiar, it's $500,000, I think, for this faster track that they call, and $750,000 for a public charging site. This is a drop in the bucket based on my own experience in building out some of these sites for our customers. So I think we as a community have a job to do to identify the appropriate costs and maybe make some good recommendations, which will make this good program even more relevant. So I will again underscore that the utilities cannot pre-build at this time. They need PUC approval, and that does not exist today. And so let's just be mindful of what can be done in a timely way. Thanks again, and I'll hand it back to you, Sherry.
Yeah, thanks, Aravind. And that's also what the PUC is saying as well. And one of the links that someone just sent me that is from a CARB website is showing the cost to install DC fast chargers as anywhere from like 104 to 112 million. So I think there are some significant costs associated with putting in some of those things for trucks. Okay, is there anyone else with their hand raised, Cherry?
There are no more raised hands, but we do have a number of questions in the questions box. I think we should probably go back to those at the end of this meeting and just kind of do what we did in the past and send responses via email, because there are not a number of them.
Sure, let's do that. And let's turn it over to Kelsey. Kelsey, are you on? And can you go through your slides real quick?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So Kelsey is a doctor of, Kelsey, what's your doctorate in? I forget, sorry.
Physics, yep.
Yeah, she's very smart. With the Army Corps of Engineers Engineer Research and Development Center, and she's been working on some freight modeling for us. Go ahead, Kelsey.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Yeah, so as Hannah mentioned, we've been working on understanding kind of how freight is moving throughout the state, just to understand where it is at the moment. For this, we've been using data from a company called Replica, and we've been looking at a number of different use cases. I've got them detailed here, and I'll go through those in just a second. I also wanted to mention that we recently have gotten access to ATRI data as well, and we've been working on doing kind of a comparison between those two data sets, and ultimately we'd like to combine them to get the best possible view of an understanding of how freight is moving throughout the state. Since we're still working on that, I did want to mention that these results are preliminary and certainly not kind of our final version. So the different ways that we've been trying to understand the movement can be broken up into different groups. First, we've been looking at kind of aggregate. So this is just overall, where are trucks moving throughout the state. So what I'm showing on the right here is a map showing the volumes of trucks on different roads throughout the state. And this is just overall kind of all medium and heavy truck trips we've been able to identify. I'm also showing on this map in the green our proposed SB 671 potential project sites. Can you maybe go to the next slide, Hannah? Yep. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've looking at aggregate flows. Maybe next slide. The next way we've been looking at freight is to kind of break that up separately into medium versus heavy trucks. Here I'm showing medium on the right, but we've got both of those use cases that we've been looking at. Could we go to the next one? Okay, we've also been looking at long haul. So here I'm defining long haul as any trip over 250 miles. This is just showing where long haul is in the state. We've broken it up into different ways we can view this. So we've got long haul that's entering the state, exiting the state, but we've also got this long haul that both starts and ends its trip within the state. I've been calling that the internal to California long haul, which is what I'm showing on the right here. Can you go to the next slide, Hannah? Okay, and the last view that we've kind of been looking at is how is freight coming into the different points of entry in the state. So this points of entry, so this would be the ports, the airports, and the land points of entry or border crossings. Here on the right, I'm showing two different maps showing the volumes of freight coming in and out of the Port of LA. We've broken this down for kind of all of the ports, airports, and border entries. So I just wanted to show kind of a representative view. I had a couple other results that we've been working on to look at climate impacts on different roads within the state, but maybe for time, I will kind of cut those results short here since they're a little less relevant. Before I'm done, I did want to mention that kind of our intent is to use these, or this understanding of how trucks are moving, to identify, as Hannah pointed to, sets of optimal gas stations that could be converted over to zero emission charging infrastructure. When I say optimal here, I should be very careful, and then I'm just saying mathematically optimal in terms of, we're rerouting our truck flows through different options and seeing which ones cause the least amount of additional travel time. We're going to be handing that off to other people, and we're hoping it'll be one layer of information that can be used in that decision making, and that decision making can take many other things into account, as some of the questions have pointed to, things like what would it actually take to convert that, versus maybe there's other sites nearby that would be easier to convert in terms of current infrastructure. So we're currently working on that, and we'll be including that information kind of in these maps for this report. But we really wanted to invite kind of different people to help give us feedback, both on these maps and ultimately those locations. I think with that kind of is what I wanted to discuss. Are there questions about this work?
Hey, Kel, so we got a question, a written question. This is from Stefan Yoon. Are these volumes average daily volume or something else?
Yes, they're average daily volume for a weekday. Mm-hmm.
And it looks like we have a raised hand. Bill Boyce. Bill, you are now unmuted and free to speak. Looks like you're self-muted, Bill.
There I go. Yeah, question. Did you really delineate how many of these truck trips are really going to be using what I would consider public charging versus behind the fence at a facility, especially with regards to the points of entry down in the South Coast area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's very interesting. So we're actually working with kind of the CEC, a number of different groups, and the Public Utility Commission and others who have been looking at kind of a similar problem from different views. So some of them are looking at like domicile locations or empty lots. We were kind of considering gas stations and that could be converted. And our intent is to really kind of share our results and be able to come up with a more unified view, because there are different options for where people could charge, as you pointed to. So we've been really focusing on just kind of this gas station portion, but I don't think that's the end of the story. I think there will be further work to combine this with other work that other groups are doing to look at, as you point to, kind of domicile locations or other places.
Okay, so just really basic. I mean, it sounds like you're trying to get fueling for the entire aggregate California fleet and not just the vehicles that would require public charging, so to speak. You're kind of looking at public charging being able to support the domiciled fleets, or have you got like a certain percentage that you're assuming are going to need the public charging versus a percentage that will, be met by a domicile charging location?
Yeah, I think our initial thought was just use kind of all of them, but I think as we combine this with others, we'll be able to be more flexible in terms of allowing kind of do a more maybe sophisticated combination where we allow options that are not just gas stations, and I guess we're still trying to figure out exactly how that combination will go.
Yeah.
Will it just be we're reducing our problem by a certain percentage, or different things. So working with those groups those other researchers to figure out how exactly we're going to go about doing that. Yeah, but I think the initial set of results, we aren't going to be striding on that effect.
We're gonna put our results together. So we need to think about both public and private. And for energy planning, they need to think about both. So we have to wrap our heads around both. We have a series of meetings that I've put on the calendar for December, where we're gonna try to come together. We're gonna try to look at the results because we have different results. We're looking at the problem in a little bit different ways. We're going to try to work together to make one really good look at where is existing electric infrastructure, where are the needs, where are the trucks parking overnight, where are the truck stops, where are the gas stations, and what do we need to look at first. So we're still working on it. But.
Yeah, I'll just point out the obvious. I mean, if we're gonna move the entire California fleet to kind of public charging, at least for a starting point, that's gonna really lead you to a different sizing solution where, you know, you're gonna need really a lot of stations, very large, versus, you know, what goes on now where a lot of the fleets kind of charge on their own behind a gate. So, you know, there's a lot of differences in how those two plans would come out.
Bill,
Yeah,
let's
I
talk
totally
about this more. Yeah, let's talk about this more because we're not trying to we're not trying to dictate what industry does. We're just trying to see where can we get the fastest and most necessary stations built first to support people who need that charging. So we can talk about it more offline. I know it's 11, but we'll follow up with you. Thank you everyone for your time. I appreciate it. And for those of you who wrote comments in the chat, we'll work on getting you a response to those. And we will see you next time we meet, which is in December. So thank you everyone. Have a good weekend.